I was just kind of binging on recovery elevator podcasts. It wasn't as like now there's a shit ton of recovery related podcasts and everything like that. It wasn't like that back then.
There's no magic answer. And his favorite saying is it takes what it takes. And unfortunately that includes some slippage.
I knew when I was in there, it was like, I knew I just needed to drink when I got home. That was just kind of like the thing. I was just like, I'm going to tell them what they want. I'm going to do what they want and everything. But I'm going to drink when I get home.
A slip happens long before you take that drink. You know, and people always say, oh, why didn't you call me? And I say, hey, if you're on the verge of drinking, if you're that close, the voice has already made up your mind for you. You're going to drink. You're not going to make that call 99% of cases.
I think it was just that thing comes creeping up on you and you hear those voices in your head.
Yeah.
And it was just seemed like a good idea to take a little bit. You know, I was in a new relationship and I just drank. And once you take that initial drink, it just sets off a chain reaction in my body. So the allergy and that phenomenon of craving and everything takes over. And next thing you know, that's all you want to do. And you think a lot of that stuff would be enough to just kind of be like, all right, I'm done. I'm not going to drink and everything. But it doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Okay, quick intro. As for this podcast, this guy, Chris, I know from one of my sobriety communities, a little different than some of my others where we do get a little more into his backstory than kind of just banter back and forth. What I think is most fascinating preview is that he goes to detox/rehab many times, whereas I never did. And so in my head, I thought, wow, he was not in a judgment way, almost you feel bad where you're like, oh, wow, he was really an alcoholic. I guess I wasn't that severe. Even though, unlike him, I drank pretty much all day, every day. He talks about he never drank on the job, which was as a chef. That wouldn't have stopped me at all, and certainly didn't stop me at the pizza shop I owned for 5 years. So I think that's a really fascinating thing to keep an eye out for throughout this. We're like snowflakes. Every alcoholic is different. And again, this is geared for everybody, though, not just those of us who identify, anybody that would like to cut back on their consumption. Please enjoy, and as always, thanks for listening and or watching. Peace. Okay, welcome to the Cappy Hour Podcast Extravaganza with my guest, Chris Follari. Hello, Chris.
How you doing today, Cappy? Good to see you.
Doing well. Did I say your last name right? I realized I didn't even confirm.
Follari, yeah.
All right, excellent. That's Follari, like amore. That's what it made me think of. I'm coming in hot. It's 4:35 Eastern time. I'm in Boston. Chris is in New York.
Beacon, New York, the lower Hudson Valley.
That's right. Beacon, right? Beacon. Yes, but I'm coming in hot because I'm fresh out of the cold shower. I usually take it in the morning. Typically a regular shower. I always emphasize to people, take your normal shower, but then at the end, turn it cold. You can do it in baby steps, but I do it for now 3 to 5 to 7 to 8 minutes. And every time I don't do it in the morning, I regret it. And today I've been struggling. I had a late night last night, not from drinking, like the old days. I feel like that always implies that, but I was out to dinner. So I was sluggish all day today. And then I finally get in the shower and I'm feeling like $1,000,000. So I'm going to be even more sober, energetic than usual. What's your experience with, if any, with cold showers or plunges, Chris?
So yeah, it's difficult for me because I don't like the cold of anything, and it's something I definitely want to try because I heard, from you and I've heard from some other people and everything, how good it is. I have a friend here in town that's in my AA home group and everything. He's got a cold plunge in his house and everything, which I'm thinking of doing. I got to try it. Maybe I'll even try it tonight because I'm going into the sauna later here in town. Maybe I'll take a cold shower after the sauna because it sounds like everybody swears by it. They say it's great.
It is indeed. And, I live in a place that wouldn't really accommodate some kind of barrel or what have you for a cold plunge. Then it hit me to just throw ice in my bathtub. Works just the same. Phenomenal. And I went through a 3-week period of doing those, including shivering, which I have a video on. Highly recommend. Great for weight loss and just great for fortifying your brain.
And what's it called? Shivering?
Shivering, yes. Yeah. If you
All right.
I mean, literally just shivering, but you stay in a cold bath for 5 minutes, which I was eventually staying up to 14 minutes, true story, at 49 to 50 degrees. And I'd
Oh,
come out of there
wow.
and I'd shiver for another 15, 20 minutes. Phenomenal. And
Wow. I'm going to give it a shot.
yeah, the quick version, it converts white fat to brown fat, which is the fat burning fat, burning fat. But more so, I was a period about a year ago where I just was feeling really mentally weak, and it really strengthened me.
Right.
And I haven't done it since. And I haven't needed it. Just like I met a guy who said he was doing cold showers to overcome his anxiety. And I said, why don't you do them anymore? And he said he overcame his anxiety. But I said, hey, man, you should still do them. Highly recommended. It is interesting. People say to me, especially females, I get it, they're always cold. The last thing they want to do is jump in a cold shower. And again, I emphasize first, you can take your regular warm shower, and then believe it or not, the cold shower finish is not going to leave you cold when you get out. In fact, as a buddy said, you have nowhere to go but up when you turn that water off. You can only warm up from there. So I can't recommend it enough. I have a bunch of videos as well on that on my YouTube page. And
that's great.
You had mentioned previously that you think you'd rather do a plunge than the shower. And that is debatable because technically the plunge will kind of, you get used to it, I guess you could say, where it's versus cold circulating water. And maybe even it might rise a degree or two. But in my case, I kept excess ice in there. I made it as hard as possible.
Yeah. I got to check with my cardiologist too, because I got to see how that would affect, because I had open heart surgery, a couple years ago, and I want to see if that would determine if I could do a cold plunge or not. But I got to try just the cold shower and everything. So
yeah. And good reminder. Yes. It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
And they say females shouldn't go below 55 degrees. I Googled,
really?
They said plunge facilities go as low as 40. They go between 40 and 60. I did baby steps. My first one, I don't even know that I put any ice in. And I think that was in around 63 or so. And then I gradually got it down to 49 and then gradually put in excess ice so it couldn't get warmer on me. And I'll tell you, man, the first minute you're in shock. You really don't feel anything, although I dreaded it every time. Although after 10 years, I still dread the cold shower every time, almost. Not so much when it warms up in the summer, and then I would turn over on my front, kind of just submerge myself. That wouldn't bother me at all. It was only when I turned back over on my back that in the shivering that would begin, that it'd be a little cold. But I had a whole playlist going, music cranked, highly recommend. I can't imagine doing it in silence. But all right, I digress. That is not what this podcast is about. Chris is on here. I know him from a sobriety community we're both in called Cafe RE, part of Recovery Elevator. And he also mentioned me. He thinks he has ADHD, which a lot of us say. A lot of us may have not been formally diagnosed by a psychiatrist. In my case, it was my therapist, my psychologist. But typically I say, if you think you have it and you learn what it really is, it's not just being distracted. If you talk to others that have it, it's just like when you talk to fellow people struggling with alcoholism, you hear your own story in them. So if you think you have it and you really know what it is, you probably have it. So
I got it. Yeah, so for sure.
So I don't even know where to start, although I'm intrigued by the open heart surgery. You all recovered from that? What caused that?
So back in 2024, in the summer of 2024, I wasn't feeling right. I had a lot of just strange stuff going on with my health, getting all these like dizzy spells and stuff like that, where I was almost fainting and stuff. And then I was having these really weird kind of like night sweats. I mean, like not normal night sweats. I'd wake up in the morning and my sheets would be soaking wet, and like any alcoholic, I kind of ignored it for quite a while, you know what I mean? Because it was like, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to face it, basically. So I just kind of ignored it. And then finally, I just couldn't ignore it anymore. I went to the doctor, to get a blood test, and he took this blood test. And then he determined when he took the blood test that he needed to look a little bit deeper. So he called me back and he said, I want you to come in and we're going to do another blood test on you. And this time we're going to do it with cultures. And that means that they're looking for something deeper than just they would get from a normal blood test. So a couple of days later, I get a phone call. I was on my way home from upstate New York, but I got a call back and saying that I want you to go to the hospital, as soon as you can, which wound up being the next day, and this was like Monday, September 2nd of 2024. And he called me up. And so I bypassed work coming home to Beacon, and I went to New Jersey because I knew I wanted to go to the hospital in New Jersey and not here in the area here. One, because my primary care physician is still the primary care physician I've had my whole life. He was like my high school sports doctor in the hometown that I grew up in. And I wanted to be down near there. So I wound up going to Hackensack Hospital in New Jersey. I went to the emergency room and they admitted me in. And come to find out, I had a bacterial infection in my blood that is normally called, it's called endocarditis, and it's like a lot of times it's caused from orally. A very common cause is dental work and stuff like that. But anyway, I had this bacterial infection in my blood, and it did something to my heart where I had to get a valve replaced. So I get admitted on, September 3rd there. I wind up having surgery the following week on September 12th. I get this surgery and I wake up in the recovery room, basically. And they told me I had a stroke during the surgery. I was completely messed up for quite a while. I was in the hospital for a straight month. I couldn't walk. I had to, basically learn how to walk again. I had to learn how to talk again. So I was in Hackensack Hospital for 1 month, and then I got transferred out to go to a rehabilitation hospital. And I was there for another month and a week there because I was messed up. I literally couldn't walk. Well, I had a walker and a wheelchair for quite a while. I didn't know. I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I was completely out of it. They come in and they ask you all these questions like, who's the president? What year is it? All this kind of stuff. And I was completely in a fog and everything. And, the other mind twister on the whole thing was for me, everything too, was that I lost my sense of taste and everything through all this because of the antibiotics that I was on for the bacterial infection, which I had to be on for, it was 30 days that I was on those meds that I had to get intravenously. Yeah. So I was in there. So I was in there from the hospital for a month, got transferred. I was in a nursing home, basically, for a month and a week. And luckily, by the grace of, my higher power, I was able to pull through that and everything. When I got out, I decided to change a lot of things and everything, which I did.
Wow, that's incredible. And you say you lost your sense of taste. So does that mean you went out and bought a bunch of tacky clothes?
Oh, yeah, no, I lost. The only thing I could really appreciate was sweets. And I got hooked on sweets and everything during that whole time.
Wow.
Like, like a Starbucks Frappuccino and cheesecake and all that. But I couldn't taste anything. It would taste terrible to me. Like my family, were Italian, and my brother-in-law has a very Italian family, and they would bring me stuff from his mother, that she cooked and everything. And I couldn't taste anything. It was horrible,
Torture. And it makes me obviously think of COVID. And luckily I didn't get it till it was pretty much over. So I did not lose that. I cringed hearing about people that lost it, especially the ones indefinitely lost it. So that's awful. Did you ever figure out what caused that infection?
I don't know. It was probably, it could have been from dental. It could have been from something, but
Right. That's crazy. And it's unbelievable how we hesitate to seek medical help, but it's kind of human nature. And especially if we think we have an excuse or we're competitive. I mean, the guy that always comes to mind is Lance Armstrong, who let his testicular go so long, his testicle basically blew up before he finally sought help. And luckily I'd read his book prior. I actually got testicular cancer, but luckily my doctor caught it in a routine groping session during a physical. And so very luckily, and Lance has even metastasized. So I said, whoa, if he let it go that far and survive, then I can survive.
Yeah.
So that helped me. But yeah, I even had a buddy who had a heart attack recently, the Widowmaker heart attack. And it has a very high chance of death. I think like 88% chance, and you have only something like 12 minutes or so. And he just pulled over, called his wife. She was like, call 911. She was 10 minutes away. He's like, no, just come pick me up. And she eventually did, and they went to the hospital. But so lucky, and he really should have called 911 immediately. But it's crazy, and it's a reminder to me, don't hesitate. But I probably will when the time comes, but I hope I won't. So now, if my math is right, you didn't immediately quit drinking because, and I asked you at the beginning of this, congrats, you hit a year last week. And so you're at a year and a month of continuous sobriety. Congrats on that. So you did return to drinking after that surgery?
Yeah. So my path to sobriety has been anything but linear. You know, the first time I went into treatment was in 2018, when I knew I was not normal the way I was drinking and everything. You know, I've gone to treatment, I think about, 6 times since 2018. You know, I went in, and this was like a horrible facility, in New Jersey. I had gone in, and first of all, I went in drunk as hell. I knew I was having problems and everything. And I had gone to my family to kind of, tell them I was having problems with alcohol and I needed to do something about it. I needed to go into treatment, and I have a cousin that's a doctor, and she suggested this facility in New Jersey, that I should go to and everything. And I went in, and I probably answered some of the questions like not to their liking in the wrong way and everything. So they wind up thinking they put me into a psych ward for the first couple nights, which was a complete way. It was an eye opener. It was just like, holy hell. Going from there, and I wound up in the hospital because I had this really bad reaction, and the withdrawals I was having from the alcohol and everything were horrible. So I wind up in the hospital for 2 nights, then I could come out of that and I go back into the treatment center I think I stayed there for 2 weeks and everything. And this was middle of October of 2018, and then I got out in like right after, it was like after Halloween and everything. So I wasn't there for that long. I only stayed for about 2 weeks. First of all, I couldn't take it. It was a horrible, horrible facility. The food was terrible. Everything was just terrible, and, but I got out of there, and I wound up staying sober for 14 months, and then I relapsed. It's like the end of January of 2022.
Do you remember what made you drink?
I don't know. I think it was just that thing comes creeping up on you and you hear those voices in your head.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like a good idea to take a little bit, and I was in a new relationship, and I just drank, and once for me, once you take that initial drink, it just sets off a chain reaction in my body. So the allergy and that phenomenon of craving and everything takes over. And next thing you know, that's all you want to do. So
yeah,
I wind up going back, and I went to Florida to go to treatment after that. That was like my second time in treatment.
Yeah.
So I went there, and I was in a program called Rebound, and it was started and run by this guy, Jason Williams, who was an NBA basketball player, that suffered his own challenges with substance abuse and everything. It was good for, until it wasn't. I went there, like I said, I went there, I got out of there, and I was there actually when COVID first started. So I was staying in Jupiter, Florida, and all through COVID and everything. And I wound up getting out probably at the beginning of April. I got to just trace back on some of these things. And came back to COVID, came back to shutdown and everything. And it was interesting because I lived at the time, I had an apartment, and because my condo was being built and everything. And I lived right in the center on Main Street and here in Beacon. And there's a liquor store like right across the street from me. And that was open. Nothing else was open. The food store was open. All the liquor stores in town were definitely open, because one of the things at the time, they didn't want, people clogging up the emergency rooms with withdrawals and stuff like that. So they just kept the liquor stores open, and I stayed sober all through COVID and everything, and moved into my place and everything. And in June of 2020, and things were going well and everything. And then it came a couple more relapses and everything that I had after that. wound up in another treatment facility in New Jersey again, which was not a good facility. Again, it was like all of my times of being sober have been long periods after being in treatment and everything since 2018. I think the problem is that when I do go out, and then when I did go out, it just got ugly fast and everything. So I wound up going to this other treatment facility in New Jersey, came out of there and then pretty much, drank as soon as I got home. I couldn't wait to get home so I can go to the liquor store and get a drink and everything. And wound up getting in trouble again, and then back into some treatment and everything. But then I kind of got a hold of it and everything for a while, stayed sober, and then in 2022, I started to slip back into it and everything. So it was like the summer of 2022, something kind of triggered me, and I started that phenomenon of like getting that little nip of vodka and everything. And then that just gets ugly very fast. And I wound up really just disappointing everybody. My girlfriend at the time, she doesn't drink, and she doesn't drink by choice. She's not one of us and everything. So she told me I needed to get back into treatment and everything, and I did. And in August of 2022, it was the end of August and everything, and things were getting really bad with me. Things were getting like where I just needed to have alcohol all the time, and I was drinking around the clock and everything. And like, so, because she's a therapist and she's she's a social worker and everything, she wound up finding this spot for me in Connecticut called Mountainside. And it's about like an hour and 15 minutes from me. It's in the Berkshires. It's beautiful. The facility is just amazing, and I've been there twice, and I'd gone there. I did detox there, which was amazing. And I got out of detox and I entered what we'll call Gen Pop. I went into I got out of because detox is usually, for me, it was about 5 days while I was there. I came out of there, and then I went into general population, and then I stood there I went in on August 26th and I got out on October 6th and everything. I was there for a good long time, and it was like, it did a lot for me because I stayed sober for 18 months after that.
Did that lead up to your surgery? Where are we at in terms of
So I stayed sober for 18 months.
Yeah.
And then I relapsed again at the end of February of 2024 after having 18 great months of being sober and everything.
I want to talk about that for a second. They say a slip happens long before you take that drink. And people always say, "Oh, Why didn't you call me?" And I say, "Hey, if you're on the verge of drinking, if you're that close, the voice has already made up your mind for you. You're going to drink. You're not going to make that call 99% of cases." But if we could get people, I need to do like a PSA. As soon as that voice starts whispering, that's when you need to make the call. That's when you need to share in community. That's the way to overcome it. If you let that thing, as soon as it starts whispering that this might be a good idea, and let that just get louder and louder. I mean, that's how slips happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Your first rehab, you made it 14 months. Then at least one of them you mentioned, you couldn't wait to get home and drink. What was the difference?
I think the facility or something, or where I was and what they do, because it's not, I don't know. Nobody can explain alcoholism, right? So it's just kind of like, I knew when I was in there, it was like, I knew I just needed to drink when I got home. That was just kind of the thing. I was just like, I'm going to tell them what they want. I'm going to do what they want and everything. But I'm going to drink when I get home.
How long were you in that time?
That was a couple weeks and everything. So,
yeah. So duration maybe makes a difference as well.
I'm trying to trace back and put together a timeline on all these things and all these times I've been in rehab and everything, but there's a lot of like places that I was in. I think the first one, they're still there, but then like the second one shut down and everything. So I'm trying to put together a real good timeline for myself to kind of really trace back on everything that I've gone through.
Yeah, man. I've never gone. It's interesting. We are all different.
Yeah.
I never had to go. But the reason when my mother did truly try to make me go, and first I owned my pizza business at the time. I said, I can't shut it down for 30 days. I can't do that to the employees. But I also thought, I'm just going to come back to the same life. and the same pizza shop
Yeah.
that drove me crazy because of my perfectionist and people-pleasing voices, and the liquor store 50 yards away. So it's not going to do me any good. I have to do this in other ways. I got to make some changes.
Yeah.
It was just vowing to her that I wasn't going to drink was enough to get me going. I joined online. That's when I discovered online recovery communities and made it 63 days before the old voice.
I think when I
was
first identified that I had a problem and everything was like back in 2018. And back then I was just kind of binging on recovery elevator podcasts. It wasn't as like now there's a shit ton of recovery related podcasts and everything like that. It wasn't like that back then. And I spent a lot of time traveling between New York and down in Washington, D.C. and everything. And the whole time in the car, I would just be binging on listening to these podcasts and everything. And you think a lot of that stuff would be enough to just kind of be like, all right, I'm done. I'm not going to drink and everything. But it doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
I know. It maddens me, drives me crazy that there's no way. You'd think by now we'd come up with a foolproof way to really help people get and stay sober, but there's no magic answer. And his favorite saying is, it takes what it takes. And unfortunately, that includes some slippage, which the acronym Some Learning in Progress. And my working title, my book is Slip. I've done all the research for you.
Yeah.
Well, it's Slip, Some Learning Progress. Anyway, so it always blows my mind that people go back to drinking after a life-threatening situation. I mentioned I had testicular cancer in 2009, but it was really one and done. They just removed my testy and I just had to get scans ever since. So I said it wasn't scary enough for me to fully learn my lesson. Apparently yours wasn't as well. How long did you make it after going to physical?
So during my time in the hospital and everything, nobody knew what was going to happen to me too, because I was like, they didn't know if I was going to be in a nursing home for the rest of my life or I needed to be cared for the rest of my life and everything. So they wound up, and I agreed to it because I was in no position to really think anything else, to be like, they wanted to get me an apartment down in New Jersey. So my sister and my brother-in-law came and like packed up my condo and they moved me into an apartment, moved everything into an apartment in New Jersey, very near the hospital and everything. That was a really nice building. It was a brand new building. It was a brand new place that had everything, but it was like, this is home. This is where I live and everything. And it was like, so I was there and I was like, just this kind of same thing. I was isolated. I was alone, not working, because of the situation of, my health and everything. And there was a lot of PTSD and everything from this too, from being in a hospital that long and just all the things that you go through when you don't know if you're going to walk and everything, and you're completely helpless, relying on, nurses to come in and change you, everything, or just like you can't move, you can't get up and everything. And it's fucking scary as hell.
Yeah,
man.
It's crazy. My brother had a stroke and I was there for a lot of it. Yeah, it's very similar to yours. It is crazy. So what made you, I have so many topics, but I got to hear it. So that's what led you?
Yeah, it was just the isolation of being alone, of being away from, what that had done to my relationship with the woman that, here I am, I have this woman that I absolutely love. I have, I'm away from her. I'm away from my daughter. I'm away from my sober community. I'm away from the comfort of my home although it's a condo, I designed the whole thing and everything. So I'm now in an apartment. All my stuff from this condo, my whole life is stuffed inside this little place in New Jersey. And just a whole bunch of things came creeping up. A lot of it was just a depression of the situation, a whole bunch of stuff and everything. And it was just kind of culminated, and it was just kind of turned into me going to the liquor store again, buying that little nip of vodka. And then after that, it was off to the races. And that compulsion of, now that I did it, it was going back and forth to this, liquor store and everything just to get this to feed. And it's not like, people that aren't alcoholics, they think like, well, you took a drink, you did this and everything. There was no drink. Drinking, vodka straight from a bottle is not a drink. That's equivalent to doing drugs, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that. And I love that you use the word compulsion. It's not used enough. The number 2 definition is an irresistible urge to do something against one's conscious wishes. So all these keyboard warriors that bash people with DUIs, even when they killed people, it's horrible, horrible. Do not get me wrong. But they're applying rational thinking to an irrational disorder. You know, nobody, a lot of those people probably had no intention of drinking that day, never mind getting hammered and driving. And it's awful. But by not having empathy and understanding that, we make it even harder for people to raise their hand and get help. And it just perpetuates the problem. So drives me crazy. So, but it is still crazy that, but I hear all the time, people that have life-threatening situations and then they recover, and that's how powerful the compulsion is. You don't think, man, I'm just lucky to be alive.
The only people that you can explain it to that get it are people, other alcoholics or something. I didn't, otherwise people just don't get it, what it is and everything. To have that you don't want to drink. You don't want, and it's like, but you comes to a thing where you have to, because it just kind of like, it's overwhelming.
It's such a good analogy that you don't hear enough, that everyone can relate to, is put your cell phone across the room and don't touch it. Especially as alerts start going off, and don't touch it.
That's a great one. Yeah.
How long would you last? That's us. When that voice is saying, drink, 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 drink. I mean, that was me at the pizza shop with the liquor store 50 yards away. I'd go in there with nothing, no booze. But then especially if we get hammered during COVID, no pun, I would have to go and get hammered. I could be back in 5 minutes or less. And that voice that whole time would just be drink, 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 drink. Yeah, it's crazy. Hey, quick note. I am launching my community, Rewired Nation. It's for both those who are looking to cut back, if not eliminate, alcohol, and also overcome ADHD and or just become more productive. It is the place where you're going to learn how your brain actually works and do the work to rewire it as necessary. And again, this is geared for everybody. So please check out, join my community. For now, it's going to be in the show notes, and hope to see it, Rewired Nation.
But you were functioning. You were functioning then. You could still operate your business and do it.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, that is crazy. I showed up every day, 5 days a week during COVID and for 5 years. Unbelievable. Well, till the end when I quit. But yeah, crazy. And what people also don't understand is we do process alcohol differently. We don't just lack willpower.
Uh-huh.
We have a completely different wiring of our brains that while we're having a drink, even the first one, it's next sip, next sip, next sip, next sip. And then when we're halfway through, approximately, it's next drink, next drink, next drink. It's so different. I went out to dinner with friends last night, drinking an NA, a Guinness Zero. I was milking the thing like I've never seen before. And like I've had my dates do when, may not even be going that well. And I'm just like, drink up just to loosen up the conversation, not to loosen them up. Don't want to be misunderstood. Just even have, drink a little faster, loosen up the convo, and they'll be milking that. And I'm sitting there, it's offensive to us, right? How people can milk an alcoholic drink or have as my Italian father has a Bloody Mary on occasion when we go out to breakfast and then doesn't drink the rest of the day. It's like, what? What is that?
Yes. God bless him.
And I milked this Guinness last night. It was so good. And if I ever get a second one, I can never even finish it. And same thing. I've witnessed dates do that. It's like, you're not going to finish that? I'm paying for it. But, I will now leave about a third of an NA beer on the table.
That's
I won't leave
great.
much more than that. But anyway, I thought of that last night. So lucky. How did your last, and hopefully your last ever day one, and I always say for every day one you declare, it's either going to be your last or get you one closer to it. But ideally, your last day one ever, was there anything unique about it?
I think the only thing was the fact that I relapsed again, and that and it was like deja vu, the family standing there telling me I got to go to treatment, me fighting it and saying I don't need to go to treatment. And I did, and it's the best decision I ever made, because it was like I got the help that I needed for my disease. And I do believe it's a disease. When I went in there, I had a great therapist. Once I got there, I knew that I needed to stay there and see it through. And like I said, I had a great connection with my therapist. I got to unload a whole bunch of stuff, which I'm still processing with my new therapist. I came out of there and I made the decision that I needed to change everything. So one of those things was, packing everything up in New Jersey and removing back up to my condo in Beacon, which sat stagnant the whole time I was in New Jersey. And thank God it didn't sell, and I didn't sell it because I did have it up for sale and everything. But I came back up here. I had the movers get all my stuff in New Jersey, move it back in here. And I kind of changed everything too. I kind of painted the walls to make them look a little bit different than not like the place that I left when I was drinking and everything. So, I moved back in here, came out of the closet about my addiction issues and everything, started to pull my life back together and everything. So one of those things was I made it when I was in the hospital. I was like, well, I'm going to get out and I'm going to run a 5K, which I did. I was able to do that at the beginning of September of last year.
Nice.
And then I started to put the pieces of the puzzle back together and get my life on track, which should be the next chapter of my life. One of those things was to jump back into volunteerism and stuff like that and supporting the communities. So I got involved with something. I did an event in October of last year with the Jacques Pepin Foundation. I don't know if you know who Jacques Pepin is, but he's a very famous and beloved French chef, kind of like somebody when I was a kid.
I've seen him on Top Chef.
Yeah, when I was a kid, that was like the go-to show on TV and everything. And so they had this event last year called Celebrate Jacques 90 for 90. It was 90 events around the country for his 90 years of life and everything. And I hosted an event here in the Hudson Valley. It was a fundraiser, and I had a whole bunch of chefs a lot of people that I worked with over the years and everything. And we did this event to raise money for his foundation. And it's kind of like what started on this next course of all the things that I've been, doing since then and everything too. So I wound up meeting this person that lives right across the river from me over in Newburgh, and he's got this nonprofit that he has called Transformation Kitchen. But Transformation Kitchen, with the goal there is to teach culinary skills for people coming out of prison or people coming out of recovery at a treatment centers and stuff, or homeless, and to give them culinary skills where they could have a living wage job and everything. So I wound up connecting with him, and he's got this great organization where he's got a whole very structured and everything. He opened one of these transformation kitchens he did in Nicaragua in June of last year. And then we're going to launch one in the Hudson Valley here in the summer. We wound up finding a good local partner and everything that we're going to build a program around, opening a restaurant that's going to employ people coming out of, the justice system, or people coming out of, people in recovery and different others and everything like that too. But I can't wait to get it started here. We wound up finding the ideal space with the ideal partner and everything to go through this with us. I'm transferred over my career over to doing something, different and everything. Prior to that, always been in the hospitality industry. I've always been a chef and everything. And I had some very high profile jobs and everything where I was the global director of culinary at one point for a large contract food service company. So I did a lot of traveling and everything in my career. And I just decided, after I need to just concentrate on doing things to be around for my daughter and be able to see her grow up and everything.
Yeah, that is phenomenal. Yeah, you go to a lot of events. You mentioned going to Boston for a James Beard. I mean, so the ones since you've been sober for life since last year and a week, that's really the hardest thing. And I always caution people, you got to, especially in early sobriety, but really throughout life, you got to go outside your comfort zone, but stay inside your strength zone. Typically social events are outside most people's strengths.
Yeah. I mean, and for me, it was never a question of because I think when I first the first time I got out of treatment and the first AA meeting I went to, and I shared and I talked about what I did for a living and everything. I had all these people at the end of the meeting telling me maybe you need to find a new line of work. You should do something different. How can you be around alcohol all the time? I mean, the truth is like, I never had an issue with work and drinking at work or drinking at events and stuff like that. I've been to the Napa Valley in wine country 4 times in sobriety and everything. And I never had an issue with being around it, everything. And I'm also have another sober community that I'm a part of called Ben's Friends. And Ben's Friends was started by 2 restaurateurs in South Carolina back in 2016. It's a cohort of sober food and beverage people. So there's everything from chefs to wine directors to winemakers to bartenders to waiters to, a whole bunch of people committed to sobriety. It was started back in 2016 by 2 people in the restaurant and hospitality business, Mickey Baxt and Steve Palmer. Steve Palmer is an extremely successful restaurateur. He's got about 40 restaurants right now throughout the Southeast and everything. And he's also a person in recovery as well. And so is Mickey Bax, who is the co-founder of it, and they started this organization and they called it Ben's Friends because it was started by a guy named Ben that wound up killing himself, in a hotel room because of his addiction and everything. He couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't have another relapse and everything. They were opening a restaurant down there and he wound up killing himself. And so they decided they needed to do something. They needed to do something for the community, and they started with a little meeting that the people from the area would get to and talk about their feelings, talk about what happened and everything. And then, really open it up. And then it really kind of started to go and grow. And then during COVID, it kind of blew up. We have meetings every day at 1 p.m. and 11 p.m. every day of the week. Well, except for Fridays. And then Wednesdays, we do a 10 p.m. men's meeting. And there's different chapters that meet all around the country in person and everything too. It's amazing, amazing organization. There's a lot of people that don't like AA, and everything. But my opinion on that is that you need something. You need a community. You need to be a part of something. You can't just go and isolate and be alone and everything.
Yeah.
So at least for me, and I believe that 100% for everybody else.
Absolutely. For me, the online communities saved me because, like many of us, I'm a hermit, and it was really a challenge. Even when I lived in Boston, where I could have just bike, walk, ran to meetings, I still was very reticent to go. In fact, I say I quit for 3.5 years pretty much on my own because I didn't want to have to leave the house to go to meetings but because I did it alone, I had no one to remind me that the only people that can moderate are those that don't need to try to moderate.
Yeah.
Now, let that sink in, people. But yeah, we can never drink normally. And as you said, this is a chronic brain disease on the same level as Alzheimer's. And there's no cure, but you can go in permanent remission.
It's scary.
Permanent remission by staying sober every day. We get stronger. That voice gets weaker, but it stays with us for life. And it will chirp. It senses vulnerability, and it will start to whisper at times. And as I said, that's when you need to make the call or share within a community or share with your friends, loved ones, whoever. But communication is so key. That engages your prefrontal cortex, which fights off your midbrain, your amygdala, which is that's the troublemaker. That's where all the bad ideas come from.
100%.
And you've got to.
For me too, it's just like trying to repair all the damage that I did over all that time. Like, with family, with friends, and even with my girlfriend, she stood by me through all of this and everything, through all those years of me going back and forth and in and out and back and forth. She had started to think I was drinking again and everything. And I was like, I'm not drinking again. And she didn't believe me. But I can totally understand how she feels, I definitely put her through a lot.
That is crazy. The timing, how that happens. But it was probably good you had the conversation, as hard as it must have been. But yeah, it's tough. And I meant to say, so online communities are great, but there's nothing like in person. So I wish I could.
Yeah, for
I'd love to get to more
and
AA meetings. And if you just go to a general one, I'm not a higher power 12-step guy, but the general meetings are great. They're just shares, just like online ones. And it's just...
No, and I have a great home group here where I live in Beacon. And so I've got a sponsor. I'm working the 12 steps. I go to my meetings consistently, and I get on my other meetings. Like I do like recovery elevator, and I'll do that a couple times a week at least, and I try to do band friends on a daily basis at some point, because it's important for me to stay connected, to people and things, because that's the biggest problem, like why people go out. They don't stay connected.
Yep, exactly. Isolation leads to relapse. 100%. Connection is everything. So key. Your heart surgery, that you had a lot of PTSD from that whole thing, which partially led to you picking up again, as they say. And I say to people, people often think of rock bottom is when people quit drinking, but no, often we need to continue drinking to deal with the trauma from our rock bottom. So my rock bottom happened in August of 14, when I almost drove with my niece leaving a One Direction concert, and I got put in a protective custody, and it was super traumatic. So I didn't drink maybe for a couple of days, but then I had to start drinking again just to deal with it. It was horrific. And it took me almost a year after my rock bottom to quit. So it's another thing that people don't really understand. It's just not that easy to quit. So were you actively drinking a lot while you were cooking around other people?
No.
Oh, no. And that's interesting, right? As bad as the addiction is, for a lot of people, when they absolutely shouldn't be drinking, they won't.
If I look back on it and a lot of things, through my life and everything, there's a lot of indications that I probably was always an alcoholic, but I was not drinking at work or anything like that. Never did that.
That's phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, like everything, we can control it. It's the same with ADD.
Yeah.
Like we can be productive when we're under the gun, when we have deadlines, but it's not always repeatable. So that's phenomenal. So do you say that are you a 1 day at a timer guy? That's a big
I do now
thing.
I just go, okay, this is good, because I don't want to look and say, I can't wait to have 5 years. I can't wait to do this. I just take it 1 day at a time, because the truth is like, 5 years means I'm 5 years older. I don't want to rush things now. And the other thing is too, is like, I've seen people go out after having 14 years, 15 years, 20 years of sobriety. You really need to maintain it on a daily basis and just look at it like it is 1 day at a time. I'm not drinking today, and I could tell you that I don't plan on drinking today. And that's all I got to do is look at every day at 1 day at a time. I used to think people, when I first started going to AA, I would look at it and go, these people, as somebody said, I'm a grateful alcoholic, grateful recovering alcoholic. The fuck you grateful for? For being an alcoholic? That's crazy. But now I'm grateful that, for a lot of the things that I had gone through, because it's made me a better person and everything.
Absolutely.
Really kind of like thinking about all the things that, you learn. Everybody should work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, whether you're an alcoholic or not, to really kind of make you a better human.
Yeah, that's interesting. How old are you, by the way?
58.
58. All right. I had a woman on, Erin, divorce lawyer and coach, and she's 30 years sober, but she's still a big AA'er. She went to their international event in Vancouver last year, but she does an inventory every day. And I said, really? Wow. And that's one of the steps. So yeah, it's interesting. I should look into it, especially because I talk about all this, just to even say, just for the material alone, to say I went through the steps. But there's so many versions of the work. I do my own form of the work, which is therapy, coaching, sharing, gratitude practice, which you just hit on. Yeah, I call myself a disciple of We Are the Luckiest, the book by Laura McCowan, and I was in her community.
I've read it.
And I truly believe it. We are absolutely the luckiest, as another author says, because we're called to do work that everybody needs to do. Everybody needs therapy. There's a lot of unadjusted people running around in the world, I like to say.
Right. There's another good book out there by, and if you Elizabeth Vargas, she was a news 2020 or something like that. She was a newscaster, but she had a problem with alcohol and everything too. But she wrote a book. It's an amazing book.
All right. I Googled that right now. I definitely recognize her name, but I don't recognize hers.
Vargas, Elizabeth. Yep. Yeah, she was, she had some challenges for a long time.
There are so many good books out there. It's crazy. Hey, do you abuse coffee like so many of us
No, I abuse eating and everything too. So I've replaced my alcoholism with binge eating and everything too. I eat like I drank. I'll wake up in the middle of the night and have to have something and not just a snack.
Oh, wow. Have you considered you may have a deeper addiction there, a food voice?
It's definitely filling the void. I think I eat like I drink, so
Yep.
I'm looking to curb that. So I'm doing a lot of exercise now, and especially since the weather's getting better and everything, I do a lot of walking here. I live right on the river. So I spend a lot of time down there, and I'll walk everywhere, this time of year.
Yep. Yeah. So just across addiction, which aren't so bad, that
Yes.
say it's ABB, anything but booze. But, I only learned recently, I didn't fully understand what Ozempic and similar drugs did, but a woman who's on it takes it, described to me as it quiets the voice. And it's amazing. I
Yeah.
knew food addictions disorders were similar, but I thought we had dipped
Yeah.
on the voice. So I found that interesting that I was like, you have the voice too? But yes, the voices are neural pathways that we built up and got dug so deeply that they virtually never go away. And in fact, that's what I define our disorder or disease as, that voice is with us for life. Most neural pathways you stop using will atrophy and die off. But in the case of addiction disorders, most addictions are brain habits that you can beat with willpower. But an addiction disorder or disease, you cannot. And that pathway stays for life. You can bury it and you can show it there's a new voice in town by doing hard things sober and doing the work, but it's with us for life. So it never occurred to me that that's basically the same thing
absolutely.
with food disorders. So have you considered going on something like that?
And I was on it a while ago.
You were.
I would consider going back on it and trying it again. Yeah. But I need to just do the work that goes along with that too, and keep up with my exercise. And you need to do everything. It can't just be, it's not a magic thing. Like, it's not like somebody tells you, like there's people that think you take an antidepressant and like now you're not depressed and everything. You got to do all the other work around it and everything. It's the same thing with like, just Ozempic or something. You got to be exercising and everything too. You can't just go take Ozempic and sit on the couch and think you're going to lose weight.
Exactly. I love you saying that because it's the same thing with the drinking drugs, the naltrexone or Antabuse.
Antabuse,
those will quiet the mind and they work for a lot of people. But if you don't do the work hand in hand, you basically have to stay on those for life. And or if you come off, you're very prone to relapsing. And it's true, that woman I just mentioned, I happen to know she's not really doing the work otherwise. So that's why, because I said, oh, have you tried going off? She said, yeah, I did. And the voice came roaring back. Well, if you don't do the work to strengthen your prefrontal cortex to fight off your midbrain, your amygdala, that's where the voice sits. So that's why the work is so important, particularly
for sure.
Therapy's for the past, coaching's for the future. And then I say sharing is for the present, but also helps with the past and the future. So she should be in a food disorder community, which exists. And I think Smart Recovery covers them all, but I know those exist. And I'm planning to launch my own recovery community, but eventually I'd love to open communities for virtually every disorder out there, including loneliness, is a big one. So yeah, absolutely. Well, we have so much discussion. We're not going to have time for the ADHD discussion today, but get super quick.
We'll have to come back to that at one point.
Yeah.
That's another whole discussion.
Tell me and try to keep it to 1 minute, maybe a little more. But did I describe where you're at maybe, that you haven't been clinically diagnosed, but you pretty much know you have it?
I haven't been clinically diagnosed, but I'm definitely confident that I do have it for sure. Because, how else like you said, it's like your brain wants you to do, you want to do things, you have the ability to accomplish them or something, but it's not going to get done. You know what I mean? Like, I've been putting off painting this closet door that I have in my kitchen and everything for months, and I have the paint, I have the rollers, I have the newspapers to spread down on the ground, and I have the time. I just haven't gotten around to doing it and everything too, because something else comes up and everything. And what I'm trying to really do is to kind of, put this on hold, and put this down and not pick it up, for a while, because, and I think that's something that led to a lot of the problems I had with my relationship and everything too, I was not picking up my phone and everything. And that was classic behavior that I had when I was drinking, because I would just isolate and disappear, and then nobody can get a hold of me. So she took it as, well, he's drinking again because I can't get a hold of him. He doesn't pick up his phone. It went right to voicemail. But sometimes you just got to put it away. You know what I mean? I'm really trying to get better at that and just putting it down, putting it away, and not getting on it, and I have to also let people know that I'm not going to be available. I'm not going to be around, because those people that care about me know that if they can't get a hold of me, they're automatically going back to, well, he's drinking again. He's not picking up the phone. So I usually send out a text beforehand, like I'm going dark for a while, and just be like, so don't worry about it.
Yep. And, I just heard a great speaker, I think it was on behalf of an ADD app called Liven, but he talked about what you hit on. For those who don't understand it, and it drives me as crazy as it does those that don't get alcoholism, ADHD, this guy said, I desperately want to do things. I've got the motivation in my head, but my body won't follow. The plan was never the problem. He said, I just can't make myself do the plan. Every night I go to bed thinking tomorrow will be different, and it never is. And it's a shame everyone treats you as lazy and responsible. He said, trust me, I don't want to be like this. And it's true, even about our chronic lateness, which is from time blindness that I've had to learn all about on my own. I say my whole life, my family just thought I was a jerk. And I say they owe me and a lot of us apologies now, and I say, do you think I want to be rushing? Do you think I want to run red lights for a living? No. At least now that I finally learned about it, it's, as we say in recovery, it's not my fault, but it is my responsibility. And I'm now borderline punctual. Thank you very much. But it only came from that awareness and shelling out, paying for coaching, and being part of a ADD community. So it's so important. So yes, you just described what it is. It's not that you're just defocused and don't pay attention and have a ton of internet tabs open, which we do, but that's just the internet. That's just table stakes. Everyone's now distracted by the internet. We have to deal with that on top of this. Also, it is a brain disorder. Our brains are wired to not let us say it. Basically, we have no work ethic until we do, until we come up on a deadline, and then we go into a flow state, and then we're machines. I have a theory, and I haven't Googled it, but I'm sure it'll confirm. Most artists, creative people, have ADD. And I just happened to hear Jay-Z talking about how he composes his songs. And he described ADD without even knowing it. He says, I get into this flow state, man, and it just happens. And it's, I'm unstoppable. And that's why this can be turned into a superpower. Yeah. Just like sobriety. And just like I read Laura McCowan's book, We Are the Luckiest, and said, I'm going to be here someday. Now I have this great ADD coach that has overcome it. And the guy runs 3 businesses. And I say, I'm going to be him someday, but it's a slow process. And that's also, I said to you, start of the call, and with this, and let you finish, that I want to say to people on sobriety calls, like, listen, this is just the beginning. Like, sobriety is going to be the least of your problems when you do get sober and you uncover your other ones, such as ADD. And that, I'd almost rather have to overcome sobriety again than overcome this, because sobriety, you just have to not drink and do hard things sober, which can just be getting through the day, and your brain will rewire. With ADHD, there's a lot more to it. There's a ton of work involved. And I talk on other podcasts and on other YouTube videos. So you talked about Transformation Kitchen, which is great. It's a unique program that addresses food insecurity, poverty, and homeless by tackling, the living wage, employment available to marginalized individuals, off the top of my head. But then the Burnt Chef, take us through that.
Yeah, so the Burnt Chef project I've been involved with for quite a while. It's a organization that started back in 2019. And this started in the UK by a guy named Chris Hall. And it was really to kind of break the stigma around seeking help with mental health issues and everything. And it's called the Burnt Chef Project. And Chris was never a chef. Chris was somebody that, was working in the hospitality business in like sales, food sales and stuff like that. But he also, I was able to identify about all these chefs and everything that he was dealing with on a daily basis, and, the challenges they go through, and it's just kind of like the whole thing is like, and it's changing now, because there's always been a stigma about this industry where you wore it as a badge of honor if you worked 80 hours a week. You worked it where as a badge of honor if you didn't go to sleep at night and you worked straight through and everything, but it's really not. That's where people get found out, and it's not sustainable. We talk about food sustainability all the time, and what about people sustainability? What about providing great positive work environments for people? So the Burnt Chef Project really kind of addresses a lot of those things. We provide free mental health support through the Burnt Chef Academy and everything. So there's a bunch of courses and everything for people to take in business and everything. And then there's, also a 24-hour, hotline that people can call if they're having issues and everything. So there's free therapy and everything as well. And it's all nonprofit and everything too. It's just a great organization to be a part of. And we're growing here, in the US with it. We're in 120 different countries around the world right now, because it's there, and it's like people don't want to address it. One of our things is like, it's the elephant in the room. When we do trade shows and things like that, we have a big blow up of an elephant because it's something that nobody really wants to talk about. Same thing goes with like, alcoholism and everything like that too. It's definitely an issue. But everybody's always, it's the stigma of not talking about it and everything. And it's like, that's the whole, because it all goes back to even like, the Alcoholics Anonymous too. It's like you remain anonymous and everything too, but it was a very different back when that started and everything. Times have changed and everything too. And I think sober people need to have a voice and everything to be able to speak about it and to also be able to help people, because if you could help one person, that's why I kind of like came out, if I could help one person by being vocal about my sobriety, I want to do that, but the Burnt Chef Project is definitely something I'm passionate about that too. I'm passionate about helping people. I'm getting involved, in a couple other recovery related avenues and everything in my future. I got I'm a certified peer recovery coach. So I do a lot of work with different, go to rehabs and speak to people in detox and speak to people about what it takes to be in recovery and everything.
Yeah, that's awesome. I got shot down. I applied to be to do the program in Massachusetts for a certified peer. And,
right.
And I didn't get in. And I want to say, God, if you only knew who I'm going to be.
Yeah.
Dare you. You hit on a couple things. One, Paul Churchill, who we know from who runs Recovery Elevator, the podcast, was just speaking on his intro of his podcast he did with Jan, who's a beloved member of the community. He talked about how the Alcoholics Anonymous was meant to be what's said in the meeting stays in the meeting. Mm-hmm. I didn't verify this, but according to him, that was the part that was supposed to be anonymous. It wasn't for people to be embarrassed that they were members. And he said, that's just playing into big alcohol. They're psyched that everyone's staying quiet. So it reminds me of a great, meme. Someone said, why don't you ever see drunk people in alcohol ads? Are they embarrassed by their customers? Love that.
Yeah.
But yes, it's true. And I never understood, and I've learned in the process, keep an open mind, but people that say they're afraid to go to an AA meeting because they might be recognized. But I'm like, yeah, the person who's recognizes you is also at the AA meeting. And certain people, because of their jobs, are worried about it. But yet I get it. Of course, there are jobs that you don't want anyone thinking there's a risk of you drinking, but that does kind of drive me crazy. You also mentioned the 1 day at a time thing, which I totally get works for a lot of people. For me, if I had to make that decision every day, it wouldn't work for me. I like to say that, my sobriety date was March 18th of 24, and my end date is infinity. I know I am never drinking again. And I know for some, maybe that'd be a risk of getting complacent, but that's why my word of the year, every year, is fortify, to strengthen against attack, mental or physical attack. And in this case, to strengthen against attack from the void.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to steal that one.
All right, you got it. And that's why I do the work every day, starting with cold shower finishes. The number one cravings overcomer, and sobriety trick or work, because it's embracing discomfort every single day. And
For
that's
sure.
what recovery is. Getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And every day, I said, I've been dreading it every day for 10 years, maybe more. I still don't want to change that water. And I say, I have it coming over my head, the warm water. And I say, why am I doing this to myself? Although now I've advanced, for the sake of time, some days I do go straight under the cold water. Take a straight.
Yeah. I'm gonna do it tonight, and I'm gonna report back to you tomorrow. I'll send you a text.
It's 10 seconds of shock. And from there, you're good. And all you got to do to overcome that, the more shocking it is, the harder I hyperventilate. And then basically, you almost don't even feel it. It really is just that initial thing. So, all right, my man.
Cool. Thanks, Cappy. Great talking to you.
Same here. I'll see you in the community. I'm overdue to get my share, and I share more in my ADD communities, but I'm due for.
Yeah, you got to send me some of those links to those. I'd like to check out some of those meetings at some point.
Absolutely, will do. And again, I hope to launch my own community, which is going to be about sobriety, recovery, but also ADHD as well, because the majority of us in that community have it because of the brain damage we did to our prefrontal cortex. So
cool.
All right, Chris.
All right, Abby.
Thanks.
Yeah, good to talk to you. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, you got it.
All right. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.